Hello and welcome back to my Alexa skill series. This is Mike from the UX+DevSummit, and in this section we're going to take a look at skills, intents, slots, and capabilities. But first, before we get to all of those different types of things, we're going to take a very deep dive into skills. Remember that I said Alexa skills are basically a set of built-in capabilities which we call as skills. So for example, Alexa's ability to include playing music from multiple providers, answering questions, providing weather forecasts, and querying Wikipedias, those are all examples of skills. So skills are a way that she can communicate with everyone around her. The skill kit supports different types of skills: custom skills, smart home skills, video skills, and brief flashing skills. When you take a look at the characteristics of custom skills, a custom skill basically is a set of intents that represent actions that your users can do with that specific skill. So these intents basically represent sets of functionality or capabilities within that skill. A set of sample utterances that specify the words and phrases users can say to invoke those intents. So for example, you can take those utterances and map each of those to individual intents. This mapping forms the interaction model of the skill. Now we're going to talk about utterances, and we're also going to talk about interaction models in the future, but for now, just keep this information in the back of your mind. An invocation name is really what identifies the name of that skill. The user includes the name when initiating a conversation with your skill. If applicable, a set of images, audio files, and video files that you want to include in the skill, and these must be stored on a public accessible site so that each item is accessible by a unique URL. A cloud-based service that accepts these intents as structured requests and then acts upon them. These services must be accessible over the internet, and you must provide an endpoint for your service when configuring the skill. Remember when we were discussing the qualities of a great skill? Well, let's take a look at that one more time. You've actually been using invocation names and utterances possibly without even realizing it. In this example, Alexa asked Sleep Sounds to play rain. We have a skill called Sleep Sounds, which happens to be the invocation name. This is the name that maps to a configured skill which has a set of intents, and these intents help Alexa figure out a request you wish to be fulfilled. If the intent is not a built-in intent, that is an intent that was developed by Amazon, most likely you're using a custom intent. And if she doesn't know how to have that conversation out of the box, well, you're most likely using a custom skill. We complete the interaction with an utterance, and the utterance represents the supported outcomes of these intents. If you haven't checked out our other videos, you may want to head over there first. Otherwise, you're in the right place. Your skill may rely on some information that may not be readily available, and in this case, you need a way to gather that information and disperse it back to the user. For example, you may be asking for a weather report. In this case, we use what is called a web service. A web service acts as an exchangement of information based on some knowledge that you provided. In this case, when we speak to an Alexa-enabled device, the user's speech is streamed to the Alexa service in the cloud. Alexa recognizes that this request represents the daily forecast intent for the weather skill. Alexa structures the information into a request, specifically an intent request in this example, and sends this request to the service defined for weather. The request includes the value Miami as the city. The weather service gets the request and takes an appropriate action, looking up the daily forecast information for the current date in Miami from that web service. Weather sends the Alexa service a structured response with the text to speak back to the user. The Alexa-enabled device speaks the response to that user, and that essentially is how information is exchanged between the APIs and then ultimately back to you. At this point, you should be recognizing a pattern emerging with your interactions with Alexa. When you are developing skills, it's important to consider the different types of conversations you may have with that skill. A mature interaction model will consider various ways and things a user may try to communicate when interacting with your skill. The combination of the invocation name combined with utterances is what ultimately creates your interaction model and what most likely it will be developed upon. If you take a look at the second half of this slide, you should notice all of the different types of ways a user may interact with the skill. Notice the different types of commands, for example. In the first line we have Alexa open sleep sounds, while in the second we have Alexa talk to sleep sounds. Ultimately, these two may be doing the exact same thing, and it's important to consider that every one may have a different type of dialogue. Although generally most of them will fall into different various categories, these are things that you should consider when you're developing your interaction model. Sometimes when you're having a conversation with someone, it may be vague. After all, when you're interacting with different people, they may, again, communicate in different ways. So sometimes people will be very specific about the things that they want, and on the other hand, they may not be. And in those cases, you should definitely consider that as part of your interaction model. If you take a look at this example, we have a situation where the user orders toothpaste from Amazon. Now, they didn't exactly specify which type of toothpaste they would like to have. So the skill that is developed from Amazon will respond, I have the following, and then it will list a set of different types of toothpastes that may be available to a user. So what's important to note here is that the conversation may not be complete, and the skill should rely on a conversation turning point to guide it further. You can also bring a visual component to your skill. For example, in our last situation, we ordered toothpaste from Amazon, but how do we know that that order was complete and everything went okay? Well, this is where a visual component comes into play. You can leverage cards to notify someone of the status of their order and if everything has completed. You can also leverage cards to remind users what the skill has accomplished, whether that's setting an appointment or just simply giving them a visual A-OK. It should be noted that the Alexa Companion app would need to be downloaded and installed for this to completely work, but the benefits of this should be pretty clear. In this session, we talked about custom skills. Going forward, we'll be briefly describing smart home skills, video skills, and flash skills. So, if you've liked what you've seen, please like, share, comment below, and check out the next session. Thanks.